Hello, everyone, and welcome to Poetcast Unleashed. My name is Nico Vernaccini. I am the host of this show where we interview people that are important in the poetry scene in Copenhagen, Denmark. And today, my guest is a very special person, Veruschka Haas. Hello.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be a guest on the Poetcast today.
Well, thank you very much for your enthusiasm. This is something we've started recently to make little short introductory profiles to the people in our community. Um, we've met a multitude of times through Super Time Books and Poetry Unleashed, the events, the Poetry Unleashed events we got, and you are I'd say known, but we know you. I know you
Yeah.
from this zine you make, this wonderful zine called Letters to Lovers.
Yes, exactly. So that is kind of like my passion project outside
Hmm.
of like my own writing, and I've kind of like been at Poetry Unleashed in both roles, both as somebody kind of like reading their own writing, but also to kind of like spread the word about Letters to Lovers.
And when did you start with poetry in general, reading or writing it?
I think my German teacher from like all the way back in school would love for me to say that it was in his classes. However, it wasn't. I wasn't the biggest fan of German poetry, so I would say it came a bit later in life, not super late. But I have a degree in English studies, and as part of that, I was in a lot of English literature seminars. And even though I think I'm slightly more partial to prose, I think it was there that I started to like fully be in touch with poetry, have my own first attempts at writing English poetry, and then kind of like pivoting back mostly to prose because I think that's just where I'm better. But yeah.
Okay, we don't have much more to talk about today. It's another segment called Prose Unleashed. It's our sister podcast. I'll invite you to that instead. We are interested in poetry here today, but what's the difference between poetry and prose? Can you give us a quick summation of the difference?
Well, I think there's like specific differences that like most literature professors or professionals or in general the literature community agrees on, which is mostly the form that it appears in. Even though I think especially in like modern times, it's a bit more kind of like fluid as a definition. But in most cases, poetry is of course much shorter than prose, even though of course there can also be like long poetry, like long form poetry. But it's, yeah, specifically the form, like often of course rhymes, specific meters that it's written in, whereas prose is a bit more like open, I would say. Like it's usually just a longer text that doesn't necessarily have to be in a specific form.
Right.
That's my definition, and I hope none of my literature professors look at me and judge me in case I got something wrong.
I mean, if they have anything they want to correct you on, they can always leave a comment here. Uh, so yeah, we'll happily take any criticism leveled against you. We'll stand as a wall. What? So you have a zine. What's
Yes.
a zine for all the boomers out there?
So, first off, there's a lot of discourse about whether it's pronounced zine or zine or what it is. Personally, I also prefer to call it zine because for me, it's kind of like a short form of like a magazine.
Magazine.
Mm, yeah. But usually zines are handmade things. There's also printed zines. So, for example, mine is a printed zine. But I think the main distinguishing element is that it is often about a specific topic. So zines can exist about pretty much everything. And then I think the zine community is really, really big. So you do have a lot of people who have zines that are handmade, whether it's like hand bound, hand drawn, handwritten, all of that. But I think especially in the past few years where zine culture has kind of become more present, there have also been some printed zines like mine, for example. But yeah, essentially, it's I would say like a short form magazine that usually like revolves around one specific topic very extensively, or is like a personal interpretation of a specific topic.
And what made you want to create one?
So I think I have had the dream of having like a publication or like working with a publication for literally since I can remember. Like back when I was younger, I would create like all of these little magazines myself just at home in a Word document. And then over the course of my studies and also like past my studies, I was involved in a lot of magazines, kind of like helping out, often on a like voluntary basis, and I just like loved it. I thought it was like so interesting. So then of course the next like logical step was to have my own. And the idea for Letters to Lovers has actually been floating in my mind for a really, really long time. And then it was literally just an impromptu decision. Like I had the idea one day, it was like a public holiday, and I was like, why not try to make it happen? And that's kind of like how it came to be after like a year of having it at the back of my mind, and then just suddenly having the like motivation to actually try and start it and see where it goes.
Okay, why not make a website?
That came next, but
Hmm.
I think it was also because when I did that, I didn't really have that much experience with websites. So for me, kind of like the magazine or like zine style publication was a bit easier. And it's also because I really like physical things. So of course, there are also a lot of zines that are like pure digital zines these days. So they are, for example, on like websites as PDF, or
Mm.
on some of the specific providers that kind of like still give it the magazine feel, even if you upload it as a PDF. But for me, from the get-go, it was quite clear that if I do make this happen, I want it to be something very physical that you can touch, that can kind of like be on your bookshelf. And so that was kind of like the idea that I went into the zine making with. And it is for that reason that I chose that it would be a printed zine rather than a website, a blog, or anything more digital.
I ask because I'm the same way. I'm also
Mm.
very textile. I just love textures, and I love touching something, the smell of printed paper, and how the
Yes.
ink can sort of smudge on your fingers and stuff. So I get it. I get it absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very stylistic, your zine. It's very
Mm.
eye catching, and it's sort of how did you go about making? I don't know if you have. Do you have an example you can show us? A physical
Uh,
copy?
I have one that I can show maybe towards the end. It's just somewhere in the back there.
All right.
Um, But yeah, the way that I went about it was I actually like in the beginning, because the way the zine started was just with an Instagram account. And I actually in the beginning created like the most awful logo that you can imagine. Like it was really, really bad. It looked very unprofessional. But kind of like the yellow that is now such a key part of the identity of the zine has been pretty much like the main color from the very beginning. So that is one thing that I already knew kind of like from the get-go before I even started it, I wanted to do, because for me the yellow has like multiple kind of like layers that directly related to the magazine and also to the topic of the zine. So for example, yellow is my favorite color, so it has that aspect.
You don't hear
um,
people say that very often.
I know it's actually quite sad because it is such a beautiful color, but I think maybe for some people it's a bit too like obnoxious, almost like too bright,
Hmm.
too, yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, that was one reason. And then the second reason was that, of course, it was supposed to be about like letters to lovers. And the last time that I fell in love before I started the zine, I was living in London, and I was living on the yellow floor of a student accommodation. So, kind of like the yellow walls and all of the yellow details on that floor were kind of like the backdrop for me falling in love. And that was another reason.
Right.
And then the third reason for yellow as a color is that in Germany, actually, like the postal system is kind of like connected to the color yellow. So all of the like post boxes are yellow, the delivery trucks are yellow, all of
Gelb,
that.
right?
Yes, good.
I remember that from German class back in school.
Good. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so everything is gelb. And so that also kind of like had then more meaning or added more meaning to the zine in that, it's a like letter zine. And so I kind of like looped in the German postal system, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So multiple layers.
And what about letters? What is it about letters that you fancy so much?
What is there not to say about letters and why they're great? I mean, I think the more people like I talk to about this zine, the more I realize that a lot of people feel that way. But for me, letters, whether it's like classic letters, like handwritten on paper, or postcards, or anything else that can count as a letter, um, it's just something that I hold so dear. It's something that I like collect to kind of like look at my past. So I have like always both here and then still somewhere in the storage at my parents' place, just boxes of letters and postcards and everything. I think it's something so deeply personal. And every time, for example, that I'm trying to get rid of some stuff because my mom very kindly asked me to clear away some of my stuff that they still have at their place, and just find myself instead like sitting on the floor for like 2 hours just reading old letters. And it kind of like brings out like all of these specific moments. It kind of like brings back the memories of what I felt when I found the letter like in my post box, or when somebody gave me a letter on my birthday. And I think it's just something that kind of like makes human relationships a bit more like tangible. Like you almost feel like the documentation of somebody's connection to you, like physically in your hands, and then you can also read it and actually like, I think it just, yeah, is something so personal and something that I treasure at least a lot. And I feel like at the same time, it's kind of like almost a bit of a dying medium. So I think that the zine originated both from my love for letters, but also from a fear of it kind of like dying out a bit and fewer people like writing actual physical letters.
Hmm. Do you reminisce a lot? Because I found that there are two tempers in people. You have people who look back on the past a lot, and then you have other people who can't wait for tomorrow. They're constantly just waiting for the future. Have you thought about that about yourself or anyone you know?
I think I'm actually like very much smack in the middle. Like there's phases in my life where I think about the past a lot, and then there's other phases where I think about the future a lot. I find it much harder to be in the present, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Like I feel like I'm either like always behind or always ahead. Um, but yeah, I think it is often the case that people reminisce a lot. And that's also one thing that kind of like inspired me then for the second issue of the zine, the entire topic, because I always give it also overarching themes for the issues, not just, letters. And the theme there was nostalgia, because I realized based on the first issue that there's so many people that look back, because it was not only people publishing like letters from others that had kind of like written them for them and sent them to them, but it was also a lot of people who specifically then decided to create letters for the zine that were looking back. So kind of like going through specific emotions and trying to reach like some kind of closure based on writing this letter. So I do think that a lot of people, look back to the past a lot. And yeah, for me, it really depends on the mood. Like sometimes I am very much in the past, sometimes I'm very much in the future. Yeah, it really depends.
I'm very fascinated by this, by nostalgia and how it's both something that's inside of us, but it also seems to be a cultural
Mm,
construction.
yes.
Um, there's this concept of hauntology,
Mm.
which is sort of a longing for something in the past that might not have happened. We kind of see it through how retro has sort of been come back. You have it in mainstream cinema. You have these remakes of 80s films and an
Mm.
80s aesthetic that has sort of come back. And many of the people who enjoy that aesthetic weren't even born then, but it's
Mm.
sort of trying to imagine, and which I think is a very human tendency, imagine that things were better once.
Yeah, I think it's for sure like a way of escaping that, is quite common these days with everything that is going on in the world. I think it makes sense that, you try to escape somewhere, and then the future seems scary, so it makes sense that maybe you try to escape to the past and return to some like past aspects, because there you already kind of like know the outcome, so there you also know what the worst imaginable thing to happen is because it has already happened.
Right.
Whereas in the future, kind of like it is all open, and that's very scary.
Mm.
But hauntology, I've never heard of that. It sounds quite interesting. So is it then a bit about like missed opportunities, so kind of like wanting to go back and do things differently, or
Yeah, the way I understand it is that there's this sort of it's really it's an emotion. It is a longing for something you can't really define.
mm,
And obviously, hauntology is not the only type of emotion that acts that way. You can long for many things that don't exist or aren't real.
mm,
But yeah, sort of having this idea that, oh, we've already peaked. We just need
mm,
to realize it and go back to that peak, which I think ideologically is an incredibly destructive way of looking at things. It's very spoiled to say that, well, we had the peak. It was 1985. Let's go back to that world. It sort of
yeah,
it always leaves behind the things that were bad once.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like ignores, like it tries to romanticize the good aspects and ignores everything that was bad. And then I guess it also almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you feel like you've already peaked and there's like no better time ahead, then there's also not the opportunity to actively like work towards making it better and making a change.
Hmm.
At least that's what I gather from what you just explained.
If you
So,
want to
yeah.
read some very smart people talk about it, I think it was Jacques Derrida who invented the term, and he talked about it and sort of how Marxism still prevails as as an idea, even though it sort of in practice hasn't been worked out. But Jacques Derrida he wrote about, and he talks about lost futures as well, which is this what we kind of see on display in our culture right now, where we have these constant remakes and no one is trying to do anything new because anything that's new is scary. But what I'm realizing is that these two tempers I'm talking about, people who look ahead and then people who kind of look in the past, I think I'm talking about science fiction and fantasy nerds. You know, they're both
Yeah.
fake. They're both genres of fiction
Mm.
that clearly can't or won't exist. But one appeals, fantasy appeals to certain values, and science fiction appeals to other values. Did you read fantasy or science fiction as a kid, or do you now?
As a kid, mostly. Now, not so much, but as a kid, I really loved it. I really was just so entranced by the world building. Like, if you find a good world, like a writer who can create like a world, and it seems so realistic, and like every detail is kind of like thought through. I used to be so entranced with that, and kind of like, yeah. I had a lot of fantasy as a kid. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would always try to think of what the worlds would look like, how it would be like to be in those worlds and move around them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, more recently, not so much. I think now I read more like modern fiction or more coming. I really like coming of age stories somehow. Um, Maybe because it makes me feel good because I see that even these fictional characters who know have like the possibility to figure everything out, even they don't have it all figured out once they like become adults and become older and near their 30s and 40s and so on. I think that is quite nice.
Do you have any contemporary fiction you'd like to recommend us?
That's a good question. It will be a very long list probably if I
Okay,
think of
I just I just need a
you can put
name or
it in the
two. I don't.
comments.
It's not that kind of podcast. We
Yeah.
just
That
anything.
is yet another podcast.
Yes, we'll do an appendix to this one. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Sounds good. I'll send through a list and we can put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, I hear some sirens, so apologies for that.
That's okay. Are they coming for you?
Yeah, surely. They heard me absolutely incorrectly define poetry and prose, and they're here to arrest me.
I knew it. I knew
I
it.
know, right?
The
Dangerous.
literature students.
Yeah, dangerous.
Um, can we talk a little bit about what's going on between Letters to Lovers and Poetry Unleashed?
Yes. So we have a collaboration, an event coming up in July, at the end of July, the 25th in Den Lille. And I haven't really done a lot of open mic nights at all. I think actually this is the first one that I'm doing with Letters to Lovers. I've done like some smaller events, but I think from the get-go, when I considered doing open mic nights, I always knew that I wanted to do it with Poetry Unleashed, because when I arrived in Copenhagen soon 2 years ago, I kind of wanted to make Copenhagen really the home of the zine, which is something I didn't really do before when I was living in Munich. And Arena was like one of the first people that I met, like in the literary scene. I met her at a open mic night, I think, at Super, and she kind of like was just so welcoming, and she kind of like offered me one of the Poetry Unleashed events to kind of like introduce the zine to Copenhagen. So it kind of felt like the first step into making Copenhagen the home of the zine. And so it kind of feels like a full circle moment to then, for the first open mic night, do it together with her, and kind of like try and give back in a way.
Sure.
And yeah, anchor it even stronger into this like really nice format that she has created and that I've now attended multiple times. Also in the role of like the founder and editor-in-chief of Letters to Lovers, and talking to people there and telling them about the concept and seeing if they want to submit, which some of them have. Yeah, so it was just like a natural next step for me, that if I wanted to do an event, I would do it with her, and yeah, bring an even more like Letters to Lovers lens to Poetry Unleashed than we have done in the past.
Mm-hmm. And is there going to be a theme for the night?
No, I think we're going to keep it quite open. So it's just going to be letters, not even to lovers necessarily, just letters. So we'll see how it goes. And then maybe in the future, it can become like a recurring thing where we then have also more specific themes for the letters to be read.
Mm-hmm. And how do people contribute if they like to write for your magazine? How do they contribute to it?
So at the moment, I have like main submission phases, kind of, which is whenever I'm working on a physical edition. So the last submission phase, I think, closed in January or February, and I'm currently working on the next edition. So for now, the like printed kind of like submission phase is closed. But recently, I also opened like the online phase. So I do also, to some extent, now want to take the zine online, whether on website or Instagram, mostly because the thing that I've kind of like tried to drive home with the zine is that a letter doesn't always have to be like on a piece of paper, just handwritten. I've tried to like kind of redefine what a letter even is, with also like artworks without any text or photos, being like almost a letter in the sense that I define it. And so I want to give people the opportunity to also submit other things, such as, let's say, videos, sounds, like essentially every medium that there is. And for that online edition, the submission period is always over. So at any given point, anyone can submit to it. But yeah, the next submission phase for the physical edition will probably either open closer to the end of the year or the next year, because I try to publish one printed edition per year, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And how many issues do you have so far?
So the next one is going to be the fourth one. So I have 3 just regularly printed in the same style.
Can you give us the themes? Sorry for the editions.
Yes. No, of course. So the first one was just a more general one. So that was just kind of like the launch edition. So just letters to lovers. The second one was nostalgia, which we've already briefly talked about. And then the third one I kind of like split into 2 parts. And it was also the longest one so far, with the first part being beginnings and the second part being endings.
Endings, I knew that.
Yeah, of course. And now with the fourth one, I'm actually doing it a bit differently. So for this one, the theme is analog, because I'm specifically looking for handwritten things, for analog photography, and for like more physical things and more like classic things, I would say. Also like kind of like very well fitting into what we discussed in terms of nostalgia, because I think these are probably, or like the past, because I think these are probably like the older forms, almost like analog photography, even though it's making a return, and then of course the handwritten letter as opposed to, for example, like typed out. And the reason why it is analog for this one is because I'm actually also changing the way that it's being produced. So I'm gonna be printing with the print house in Copenhagen, which has now moved into Super, actually. So that's a risography like printing studio. So it will look slightly differently. Everything will be hand printed. I'll also hand bind it together with the owner of the print house. And that kind of like then inspired me to go the same direction with the theme, to have it like analog. Yeah.
And where do people buy your zine if they want to take a look at it and be part of this?
Yes. So it is actually sold out in most places, which makes me very happy.
Nice.
But as far as I'm aware, there's still some stores in the UK that stock the 3rd edition. So it's still available there. And then last time I checked, Super in Copenhagen still had a few issues. And then every now and then I go to zine fairs, mostly here in Denmark. And there people also have the opportunity to buy it. And for the upcoming one, I'm still trying to figure out what's best, because it is like a bit difficult. I don't know if you know this, but in Denmark, the regular like letter sending and postal system is going to close down, I think, by the end of the year.
Yeah.
So
Terrible.
that is also like something to say about letter writing dying, I guess.
For sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it used to be like part of the national pride. One of our great kings, one of the few great kings, Christian IV, who built a lot of the famous buildings in Copenhagen. He was very proud that his postal office delivered mail, I think once every day or once every 2 days.
Wow.
That was the standard back in the 1600s, right? And then it's just become terrible since. But yeah, they're closing in 2026. Are you gonna pivot at that point? Will people even know what letters are anymore at that point?
I hope so. I mean, that is kind of like partly the purpose of the zine. So of course I have like people write letters that they then submit, because there's a lot of people that not only submit like letters that they have received or written in the past, but also specifically create something if there's like a theme that resonates with them. But I usually create like little kind of like things alongside each issue. And they're always made to inspire letter writing. So I'm also hoping that even if people don't submit, maybe the zine will help to inspire them to write more. So for example, like for the 2nd edition, I created postcards that already had like a little prompt on them. And then for the 3rd one, I did letter paper, I did envelopes, and then I created this like in Danish, I think it's like a klippecord where you can like get like either stamps or like clips, and then in return get something. So for example, like it's often a thing in, let's say, coffee shops where you get like the 10th coffee for free if you know, like have a klippecord or like a loyalty card that you get stamps on. Only it's for letter writing. So it's like this little card where people have like I think 10 letters, and then they can request letters from others and tick it off once they get a letter. So I'm trying, like, I have a very small platform, but I'm trying to, at least in as far as I can, inspire more letter writing, because I hope that it will not die out, and I want it to continue to be the theme of my zines. Though currently no plans to pivot, but I'll let you know if I have like a Tinder message or WhatsApp message or whatever addiction.
Now we're
Maybe that'll
talking.
be upcoming.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Let
you
us
said
Tinder.
you said your zine comes out in the UK as well. How many countries are you published in?
So essentially, the UK is just one of the countries where I stock it. And then it's mostly just me shipping it out to different countries. And it's quite difficult to say how many, because it kind of like varies. But I think like with each batch that I've had so far, I've shipped it out to maybe like 10 to 15 different countries.
Yeah.
Like it's really like I ship it out to everywhere in the world, which has its own things because I do everything myself. It's a one person kind of like.
But how have
business.
you shipped it out to 10 different countries? Like, how did that happen? That's
And
crazy.
it's people from all over the world finding the Instagram or finding it somewhere else. I've shipped it to Australia, to India, to Pakistan, to of course the US. I've shipped it more or less like to different countries each time, and each time I'm surprised, and each time I have to look into all of the specifics about like postal services in different countries. So now I have a lot of experience also which countries have good postal services and which ones I'm worried about. So a lot of learnings. Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. Congratulations on the
Thank you.
reach.
Thank you. Yeah. And then of course, like a lot of the stockists that I have in the UK, they also ship internationally. So there's no way of telling like where else it's might end up at, because I don't know who they send it out to. But yeah, I think the wildest request so far that I've got like was a company or like a shop, I think in Shanghai, that wanted to stock it. But it didn't really make sense because just shipping on my own, of course, the magazines to Shanghai would have been super, super expensive. So yeah.
Do you have anything you'd like to read for us? This is
Yes,
something I ask of all the poets that I interview here.
Yes. So I would love to read one of the pieces from the upcoming analog edition. It's not going to be my own because I think I didn't actually like mention that quite specifically, but I think it's something that was implied in the conversation. But it is a submission-based scene, so I'm primarily publishing like other people, and everybody can submit. So I will be reading a piece for the upcoming one that is called Can't Repeat the Past. So kind of like a bit in line with what we were talking about, now that I think about it.
And who wrote it?
It's from Tatiana Kaliako. She's already been published in some of the previous issues, so it's quite nice. And she created this beautiful piece. Maybe I can share it with you afterwards, that already has like its own illustration with it. But yeah, I'll just go ahead and read it to you. You sang of birds, neck glistening in the limelight. I wanted to sink with your pulse, to rejoin the rhythm of your life. We kissed under the many watchful eyes of spectacles in an optician's window, doomed characters of the American novel. We'd failed before, but in a youthful, clueless way, the type of failure that meant we could try again. Now, the birds you sing about shall punish you with silence. Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Why did you choose this specific piece?
I really, really like it, and I think it's like so short, but it's really like still gives you the feeling of that scene. Like I can immediately see it in my eyes, like in my like mind. And it's also quite funny because um I know this person lives in Munich and I'm from Munich, and I have like this feeling that I know exactly like which optician it is,
Mm-hmm.
because there's like this one that is quite central, and it always does all of these like big displays. So of course for me specifically now it's like this, and I'm like in that scene. But also because it is one of the, I would say, like more poem me like poetry submissions in the upcoming one. And since I had to disappoint you with telling you all about how I prefer prose over poetry, I thought at least one of the pieces that I would read to you would be a bit more poetry, so that you don't have to make this prose unleashed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you very much. Very thoughtful of you to do that.
Yeah, I gotta keep
So
it on brand.
when is issue 3? When is issue 3 coming out?
Issue 4.
Issue 4.
Yes, so the analog edition. It's probably going to come out in like mid-August, late August. I have to see how long the printing will take and the hand binding. So I can't say like a specific date just yet. It depends a little bit on how helpful I am, and like yeah, and how the printing goes. But yeah, currently the plan is like mid-August, end of August.
Okay. And then I'll see you on the 27th for
25th.
25th. Thank you very much for
Yes. See you on the
the
25th.
collab between Letters to Lovers and Poetry Unleashed. Thank you very much, Veruschka. It was a very, very pleasant conversation.
Thank you for
You're
having
doing
me.
great, and I'm very happy you said yes to this interview. It's yeah, it's been nice,
Yeah,
and
I really enjoyed it.
thank you very much.
Perfect. And I'll send you through my list of prose, like no, not prose, sorry, of novels.
Yes, do that. Do that. Make a recommendation list, and we'll all glimpse it, but none of us will actually read any
It
of the
won't be a
books.
reading list. It will just be recommendations. It's no summer reading or anything like that. No.
Fantastic! Wow, no expectations. I like that. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And I am gonna see you all on the 25th of July at Den Lille,
Mm.
which is where we usually do it. Like, subscribe, follow, do all the rigmarole, and thank you very much for listening in.